All right, good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. Supervisor Cortez is going to be joining us a little while later, but we're going to get the meeting started in respect for all of your time that you took to get here today. Thank you all very much. Good thing the 49ers and Raiders aren't on Monday Night Football, huh? All right, I want to let you all know that we do have, is it Tina? We have, right there, Tina, I was looking in the back. We have Tina, and Tina, we have translation services available for both Vietnamese and Spanish. Is that correct? So if there's any speakers here that would like to speak in Vietnamese or Spanish, we have a translator who can do that right here. Please see Tina. Also, anybody else here that's interested, we use speaker cards for identifying and calling you up, and for the public record, the cards are in front today. The cards are right up here, the yellow cards in front. We ask that you pick one up, put your information on it, and then leave it there. The clerk will pick it up, and then I'll call you up by name. When I call you up, see the two silver poles here on the side? I'll call up 5 or 6 people at a time. Please all come up there, get in line. Once you get there, it's first come, first speak. There's no need to speak in order, but I do ask that you identify yourself for the public record once I call your name. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak tonight that has not yet filled out a speaker card? I see 1 in the back, 2. All righty, we'll go with that. Normally what we do with 15 or more speaker cards, we limit things to 1 minute each on speaking. We're going to allow up to 2 minutes each. There's no need. You can fill the 2 minutes if you want to, and if you don't want to, that's okay too. So we'll call this meeting to order, and that's item number 1. Item number 2 is public comment. That's different than this. That's when you can speak about anything not on tonight's agenda. I have no speaker cards about anyone wishing to speak about anything not on tonight's agenda. So for the record, we'll move, Madam Clerk, on to item number 3, which is to receive report from our Roads and Airports Department. We have staff presentation here. Excuse me just 1 second. All right, and Mr. Freitas, we're going to do staff presentation first, then I'll call up the names and we'll have public comment. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Harry Freitas. I'm the Director of County Roads and Airports. Also want to introduce Eric Peterson. He's our Airport Director. Ken Betts, our Assistant Director of Aviation, is also here. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. We've been working on this for quite some time, and we're very pleased to be able to present this to the Hewlett Committee and hopefully soon bring this to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors asked us to prepare an update to the County Airports Business Plan. In December, we went over the scope of that project, and we roughly completed that effort in May of this year. We've been working through a public process until now. And certainly we look forward to hopefully some clear direction that will allow us to bring certainty to the future of the airports here in Santa Clara County with our community, with our pilots, with our tenants, and certainly with our Airport Commission. So I'll move into the presentation and just talk about what our agenda is for today in terms of the presentation. We want to talk about what the scope of the business plan was. We want to talk a little bit about the background of the airport's business in general. And we're going to go over the new plan that we've developed, obviously subject to approval by the Board of Supervisors. Within that, we're going to talk about our revenue plans, the FBO developments, the purpose and need for property releases, what we have in terms of facilities needs, and then a discussion about the grants and how and when and if the airport is going to take grants, the airport system. And then we'll talk about the staff recommendation and an option. So certainly the business challenge, I think, is pretty well understood, but it's important to go over it so that everybody starts off at least from a basic understanding of some facts. Costs are always increasing, and costs are currently increasing faster than revenue increases. The revenue increases in this enterprise fund are mostly tied to the CPI, although there can be changes in there can be changes in fees as we collect them on a budget basis. But basically, we have less aircraft storage, although we do have more flights at our airports. Staffing has declined. Currently, both airports in Santa Clara County are staffed by 9 positions. The leases at both airports are up for renewal. The Reed Hillview leases will all be up in December of 2021, and the San Martin lease, it's a single lease, will be up in 2020. Currently, the maintenance of the airports is poor. The airfields, though recently repaved, the facilities are worn down, and they have suffered from a lack of investment over the, I'd say, over the last at least 10 years, at least since 2011 when we stopped taking grants. So the scope of the business plan, as approved by the Board of Supervisors, kind of goes over these individual items. We were to perform an analysis of the enterprise fund and its overall finances relative to each individual airport, and we've done that. It's important to note what an enterprise fund is. The enterprise fund is different than the county general fund or the road fund in that it's as close as the government generally gets to operating as a business, in that each year the books must balance and that the money that comes in must equal the money that we spend. We receive no subsidy from the county's general fund. We also attempted to define the interrelationship between the airport enterprise operating fund and our capital budget. Certainly the capital investments that we make relate directly to how much it costs to operate the airport. We wanted to identify all the revenues that we're currently receiving and whether or not there's an opportunity to diversify those revenues. Certainly revenue diversification is important for all businesses, and then looking at any types of new revenue that we can bring into the system. We also looked at opportunities and cost-saving measures. We've reduced maintenance and staffing to the extent that we think is possible at this point, but we did examine those. We examined the schedule of fees and charges, and that's in the report. We talked about a release strategy for the FBOs. As I mentioned earlier, the FBOs will be up for the leases, which are essentially about 50 years old, at least at Reed Hillview. They'll be up for renewal, as I had described. We also wanted to talk about the viability of non-aviation commercial development, and we'll talk a lot about that. The airport has excess land, at least that's what the Santa Clara County Airport staff believes, and we believe that that land can be monetized. We want to create a long-range maintenance plan for airport infrastructure because, as I said previously, the condition of the facilities is poor. We want to determine the role of AIP grants and how they can be used to fund capital improvements. And then we're going to bring that to the Board of Supervisors, and this is part of that process. So in terms of background, and I'll go over this briefly, Reed Hillview was opened in '39. The county purchased it in 1961. The county purchased it with the assistance of the federal government. There's approximately currently 475 aircraft that are based there, and we did about 163,000 operations in 2017, an operation being defined as a takeoff or a landing. Just by way of comparison, in 1978, this airport did about 400,000 annual operations. San Martin, constructed completely by the county, opened in 1972. There's about 150 aircraft down there. It did 32,000 operations in 17 and 60,000 in 1997. So the revenues, currently our budget is $2.7 million. Our revenue actually comes in a little bit less than that. It comes in at about $2.4 million. And every year for the past 10 years or so, we've been drawing from a budget reserve that we have. We have a $3.5 million budget reserve. This year's budget, we anticipate, or out of the $2.7 million, we're expecting about $2.4 million in revenue. So we're going to draw, the plan is to draw $300,000 from our budget reserve. Of that 2.7 or that 2.4 million, aircraft storage accounts for about 75%. That's basically rent. The FBO leases actually only account for about 10% of our overall revenue picture. And then the rental income, and by rental income I'm referring to parcels that we currently are getting revenue off of, like the Swift Avenue building out on Capitol Expressway that we rent out. We receive about 7.5% of our annual budget from rental income. excuse me, expenses, salary and benefits of that 2.7 million, about close to half of it, 45% of it goes to salary and benefits for the 9 positions that I've referenced. About 20%, 18% actually for debt payment. Really 2 loans that we currently have. One, we recently took out a $3 million loan to pave both airports. And we also have an outstanding loan for about $3 million that we're making payments on for the San Martin hangars that we built. There's fees to the county to operate our fund, to pay for global services that the county provides at about 17%, and then we put just under 10% into facility maintenance, which we're interested in increasing. So the plan, as we said before, we're not taking in as much as we need to spend. So in simple terms, we need to increase revenue or cut expenses, and we've also indicated that the facility isn't to par up to the level that we'd like. So certainly increasing revenue is the primary recommendation in the plan. And that increase in revenue is mostly being proposed from non-aviation uses. We're also proposing to increase revenue through a couple of community benefiting parcels. We're also talking about redoing the fixed-based operator leases, which would increase revenue. We also have two solar arrays that one has come online and the other one's coming online soon, one at each airport. We're getting revenue from that. And then adjustments to fees. The plan also talks about increasing maintenance. We've identified $20 million that are needed to improve both airports over the next 10 years. Roughly breaks down to about $10 million on airfields and about $10 million in facilities, just by coincidence. And then lastly, we're recommending to accept AIP grants. The last grants were accepted in 2011 by the county, so it's been 8 years since we've accepted grants. Just by way of information, grants from the federal government, AIP grants that is, are limited to essentially airfield improvements. They include lighting and signage and generally improvements to the movement area for the aircraft. What's not included or not eligible for grants is the facilities. So let's talk about increased revenue on the non-aviation uses. So we identified that the county airports have excess land, and we'll show a map of that in just a moment. So the strategy is to monetize that excess land. This is a common strategy for general aviation airports. It's actually a common strategy for a lot of airports. It really depends on where they are, how valuable their land is, and what the demand is. Now, certainly this airport's in an urban area, and in urban areas, land has value. Certainly commercial land has value. Now, one of the key issues with us, the county, using its land at its airports is that the Federal Aviation Administration must authorize non-aviation uses through a mechanism that is formally known as a property release. So the county must obtain property releases from the Federal Aviation Administration before it can begin the process to monetize excess lands or land that we deem for non-aviation uses. We've identified 6 parcels at Reed Hillview and 2 at San Martin. This is expected to take several years. In addition to the property releases, in order to start receiving revenue from lands that we have, we would need to do, as I said, the property release, a request for proposals to potential lessors, lease negotiations. They would probably need land use approvals to put up new buildings from the authority having jurisdiction. In this case, City of San Jose and Reed Hillview and the County of Santa Clara down in San Martin. The second area that we talked about in terms of increasing revenue is there's 2 parcels that currently are providing community benefiting use. One is the East Ridge Little League, and the other one is the Lions Club. The East Ridge Little League is located on the airport property at Reed Hillview, and the Lions Club is at San Martin. Right now, neither of those uses is paying the enterprise fund any rent that would be defined as market rate. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear because I want to make this crystal clear. We are not recommending removing either use. What we are recommending, however, is that the county, through its budget process, recommend appropriate funding be identified to reimburse the enterprise fund, the fair, relatively fair cost of the use of those two parcels. And also in terms of increasing revenue, we have an FBO strategy. So as I said, the current leaseholds expire on December 2021. The strategy is to reduce the number of leaseholds. There's currently 9, and we'll look at a map of that in just a moment. The idea is to provide full-service transient services that currently not all of the FBOs at Reed Hillview provide full service. Some do and some don't. Certainly we want to have enough services out there to maintain a cost-competitive market. We have a goal of using the property more efficiently. The property is not laid out in an efficient manner. It was laid out in over 50 years ago. These leases are 50 years old, and land wasn't as valuable as it is today, and it's not being used very efficiently. We also are interested in improving the quality of the buildings and the grounds. In addition to, as I described, the public facilities at the airport being run down, the FBOs are not generally in super great condition either. So there's a desire to improve the quality of those buildings. And then this would also free up a new non-aviation parcel, and it would better utilize some ramp space, and we'll look at that in just a second. So the goal, as I just said a moment ago, was a more coherent land use, eliminate what I call the cul-de-sacs that are currently providing access. The new leaseholds would have direct runway frontage, and we would reclaim the ramp space in the AOA. So if you will, look at the top picture. There are 9 leaseholds in that picture, and at that, let me see if I can just look at the next slide. Yeah, let's go to this one because it's a bigger picture. So on the picture on the left-hand side, those are the fixed-based operators at Reed Hillview Airport. The small white building in the bottom corner is actually the Reed Hillview Terminal. And so you can see there are 9 parcels out there that are divided up by leases. And they have, FBOs require essentially access to what I'd call a landside. And they require access to an airside. So in order to do that with the 9 parcels, as you can see in this map, essentially cul-de-sacs had to be constructed. So the road along the top of the picture is, I believe it's called John Wilson Way. And it provides the landside access along the top of the picture to the 9 parcels, along with the cul-de-sac coming from the landside. And then the 2 airside cul-de-sacs come in and penetrate these 2 land masses to provide airside access. So the current layout of the leaseholds vary from 1.1 acres to 2.7 acres for a total of 17.8 acres. Now the proposal that we have for, and this proposal is certainly dependent on the market and on really starting negotiations and conversations with everybody involved, stakeholders and potential leaseholders and existing leaseholders. The new proposal would have 2 leaseholds, essentially. Instead of 17.8 acres, it would be 14 acres even, so about 7 acres apiece. As you can see, those have pushed further towards the airfield, so they're reclaiming some of that ramp space that I had talked about, which currently isn't very well utilized. And by pushing that use up, it'll allow a clean airside interface for the 2 parcels and a clean landside interface along that, what's described on the right-hand picture as the new non-aviation use. So, you know, what this does is it satisfies most of the kind of criteria that we had put in here. More coherent land use, eliminate the cul-de-sacs, new leaseholds have direct runway frontage, and reclaim ramp space for the airport. And it reclaims that space and still allows proper airport movement. So, you know, this could easily be, you know, 3. But right now we've got this laid out as 2, but our consultant is recommending, in order to stay competitive, at least 2, and in order to have full service, about 7 acres apiece, and that's what we're recommending. So at San Martin, a little different because it's such a smaller airport in terms of operations. Current leasehold expires in 2020. We have one FBO out there, and it's really probably closer Well, we have one tenant out there. And our proposal is to lease a maintenance hangar, office space, and a ramp area to Asaso, and that the county assume management of the individual hangars within the San Martin FBO, and that the county assume management of the self-fueling island at San Martin. So this gives a picture of both of the airports, and I think I'm sorry about the size, but it's kind of about as big as we could get it. So as we walk through all of the airports, on the top picture is the Reed-Hillview Airport, and on the bottom picture is the San Martin Airport. And the properties that we're talking about are property number 1 is commonly known as the southeast parcel. It's Tully and Capitol. Parcel number 3 is the Swift Avenue parcel, which is currently used for private development, but for private non-aviation. Well, let me say it differently. It's aviation supporting, but it's leased out to private lessors. So we want to maximize certainly the Swift Avenue parcel. Area number 4 is commonly referred to as the laydown area. We want to monetize that. Area number 5 is the new Reed-Hillview northeast corner. That was the parcel that we referred to in the previous picture, being freed up by the realignment of the FBOs. Area number 6 are the new FBOs, as we described earlier. Area number 8, and I know area number 7 shows the Reed-Hillview fuel sales. And area number 8 on both pictures show the new solar farms. You can see solar on the bottom of the Reed-Hillview picture and actually to the south at San Martin. And then area number 9, Reed-Hillview FBO. And then the 2 community benefiting parcels. Area number 2 is the Reed-Hillview Little League. We're looking for a reimbursement from the county's, from an alternate funding source for that. And same with the San Martin's Lions Club, which is depicted as parcel 10 in the revenue parcel layout picture. So then we're also making some recommendations relative to fees. So it may seem counterintuitive, but we've heard this from a lot of our customers. We're really proposing to decrease fees, and we're hoping that by decreasing fees we'll decrease our vacancy rate or increase our occupancy rate. That would result in generally an increase in overall revenue, although there's a risk associated with that, and we have to monitor it carefully. Santa Clara County has proven to be higher than many local airports in terms of its lease rates. And we're specifically proposing to reduce the San Martin hangar rates, and we're reducing all tie-down rates at both airports. So in terms of the maintenance that we talked about earlier, we identified about $11.6 million worth of airfield improvement projects that need to be done in the next 10 years. We've got pavement management, perimeter fence, some safety area enhancements, a new access road, backup power, and then the parking ramp rehabilitation, runway and taxiway rehabilitation. So it's about 11.6 or $11.7 million. In terms of the facilities, we did this study by the facilities study by updating a previous facility study that we have. So it's not 100% complete. So it includes an analysis of the Reed-Hillview Terminal Building, the Reed-Hillview Swift Avenue Building, and the San Martin County-owned hangars. But it does not include the Reed-Hillview hangars, the Reed-Hillview FBO buildings, which are really private buildings, at least as they are currently in the lease, and the San Martin private hangars, which currently are within the FBO footprint. With that alone, with the analysis that we did prepared by Kitchell, our building consultant, we identified about $10 million over the next 10 years that needs to be invested in the facilities. So then I wanted to move on to a discussion of grants. So the majority of eligible airports take federal grants. They're, as I said before, used to improve airfields. The last grants issued to the county were in 2011. So the county has not accepted a grant in the past 7 years. Grants obligate the county, however, through the use of what's called grant assurances, basically a contract with the federal government. It obligates the county to operate the airport, and it obligates the county to conform to the federal rules as defined by the federal government in the operation of the airport. The grants break down into really two types of grants. There's what's called an entitlement grant, which is essentially money that's given to every airport in the nation, public airport, up to $150,000 per airport per year. And you can use that money pretty much any way you want as long as it is for eligible projects, but you don't have to compete for the money. Bullet number 2 talks about the other type of grant money that we may receive, which is discretionary grant funding. And we receive this on a request basis because we have to apply for a grant. We compete with other airports, but we think we would be successful in receiving grants here in Santa Clara County based on the importance of our airport. If we receive grants, if you combine the federal portion of the grant and the state portion, because the state of California also subsidizes airport projects, Santa Clara County could receive up to 95% of a project or an eligible project cost if it were to apply for grants. Now, a little discussion on grant assurances. Grant assurances last for 20 years. The current assurances, because I said we took our last grant in 2011, the current assurances expire in 2031. Within those grants is a list of grant assurances. I believe there's 29 grant assurances. And a lot of them have to do with how we build the project that the grant is funding. But a number of them, I believe about 20 of them, have to do with how we operate the airport. And they say that we have to operate the airport for 20 years, and they say how we have to operate it, and that's in conformance with FAA standards. Without grant obligations, the county may gain more local control. And I wrote the word may because I want to talk a little bit about some of the risks and then some of the federal law surrounding grants that we've discovered through this process. As I said, there's a 20-year obligation. There's a requirement to keep operating, and you're required to follow FAA regulations. The federal government passed a law called ANCA, and it's known as the Airport Noise and Capacity Act. It's known as ANCA of 1990. And what it did was it gave more power to the FAA, regardless of the status of the airport relative to grants. So what it means is that whether you take grants or you don't take grants, ANCA gives the federal government control over a specific area of airport operations, and that's essentially access restrictions, commonly known as what you would call a curfew. So what the FAA says that whether you're a grant airport or not, you can't, well, that the ability to restrict the hours of operation are a federal matter, not a local matter. So that's in the report. There's a discussion of ANCA in the report. So I'll wrap this up now with the staff recommendation. So the staff recommendation is to approve the business plan. It is to accept $1.2 million, which is the entire amount of entitlement money that the county currently has essentially in account with the FAA. So we have $1.2 million sitting there waiting for us to take it. And that $1.2 million would allow us to begin repaying the $3 million loan that we recently took from the general fund to pave both of the airports. We're also recommending that we apply for additional federal and state grants for the improvement of airport infrastructure. And then we apply for property releases from the FAA, those properties that we talked about ad nauseum earlier. This would be the formal recommendation for the staff to apply to the FAA for release. And then we're also asking the Board of Supervisors to direct us to prepare an RFP for the FBO properties in conformance with the strategy that I described. As an alternative, and the reason why we bring up this alternative is because we've certainly, as we've take this to the community and we've talked to everybody and we've heard from the constituencies, there's a lot of concerns about accepting grants, local control, airports as members of the community. There's an alternative that we've outlined, which is approve this business plan, adopt a policy not to accept grants at Reed Hillview Airport, essentially split the airport system into 2 airports, accept grant funding at San Martin, at least to the extent that we can, to begin repayment of the loan. apply for property releases to the extent possible. Certainly, property releases are subject to FAA approval, and their discretion is something that we would be working towards. And then renegotiate the existing leaseholds. And I say to the extent possible, if we don't take grants at Reed Hillview Airport, it's probably pretty likely that it'd be difficult to negotiate or get interest in long-term leaseholds if the future of the airports is dubious. Now, in terms of outreach and coordination, and I'll wrap this up now. In November of 17, we took this to the Airport Commission and the Hewlett, and then in December, as I described, we took it to the Airport Commission again and the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors gave us direction to do this work. In January, we had meetings with Reed Hillview and San Martin stakeholders. In February, Reed Hillview again. March, Reed Hillview stakeholders. And then in May, we published the preliminary report. We went to the Airport Commission, we went to the Reed Hillview stakeholders with a published report, and the San Martin stakeholders with a published report. And then finally, in September, in anticipation of this hearing, we've also been to the Airports Commission twice. That concludes our presentation. We appreciate the opportunity to present this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think what we'll do is we'll move right in. We have quite a number of speakers here. And I think we'll move right into speakers now to give you all the opportunity to speak. I'm going to call you up again. When I call you up, please come line up. Whoever gets there, first come, first serve. Give your name, and we'll go from there. You'll have up to, Madam Clerk, 2 minutes each is what they'll have. You do not need to use all your 2 minutes, but if you want to use your 2 minutes, you're welcome to do so. So let's start off with Ted Johansson. Come on forward. Phil Mastrocola. David, I'm going to say Goodlin. There should be 3 people walking towards the center strip right now. David, excuse me if I get this wrong. Andy, A-I-D-D-E. Thank you. And before we start, it's that podium there. It's got a built-in microphone. Okay. And the timer will start when you start speaking. But if you could hold off just 1 minute. The Board of Supervisors prides themselves in providing a safe environment here for speakers. So we'd ask that there be no clapping, no booing, no background noise. Okay, we want people, regardless of what side of any issue, when they come here to speak, that they feel safe and comfortable in doing so. So if you can just refrain your comments, please, we'll respect everyone equally. Thank you very much. And if you'll identify yourself and start speaking.
My name's Ted Johnson. I live at 1871 Darwin Way, San Jose, 95122. Been a long-time resident, over 50-some-odd years. I would like to go for the alternative program, mainly because I think it will give the commissioners and the county more time to evaluate the usage of that property. Right now, it's all airport. I think that we've been fooling around with this property for a long time. We had a program in there to measure airport noise, and that disappeared. It would have also measured the flight patterns of the aircraft that took off and landed at Reed Hillview. That disappeared. We have no way to accurately tell how many takeoff and landings happen at Reed Hillview. They're done with a button at the control tower. The control tower activity to keep people in there is they have to have so many operations to keep a tower operator in there. That's federal. I live there. I see how many planes go over. They're completely off in their number of takeoffs and landings, and we have no way of knowing. We had it, they took it away from us. And I think that that was criminal because those are facts that we could have used to say this is a lie about the airport. I'm a longtime resident. We've been trying to close this. You guys have to,
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
okay, I'm supposed to have extra time.
So, what's that?
I was supposed to have extra time.
No, you got the full 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a counter right up here that you can track yourselves on. We need to be equal with everyone. Next speaker, please.
David Andre.
Gotcha. Thank you, David.
I haven't been around the airport for too long. Actually, my first flight out of Reed Hillview was in 1948. But I'm really concerned, the new plan that has been worked out is a far greater improvement over what started. And most of it's workable, provided that we accept the grant. And the fear of accepting the FAA grant is they're going to tell you how to fly safely. That's their objective. And the first thing they're not going to let you do is have high-rise buildings in the shopping center, like they have over at Valley Fair or Santana Row. That big quagmire, you can't build that in the approach lanes of the airport. That's the conflict. That's probably the biggest conflict, is the business pressure to get the airport out of there. It's been there for a long time, and it was in a cow pasture when they put it out there. They put it out there for a good reason. People bought the cow pasture around it cheap, and now they want it to move. One other cravat is that, where will these airplanes go? They can't go back to Muni. They got kicked out of Muni because they wanted to make that for only air carriers. San Martin is a long ways away. And when I used to land at San Martin, it was just a dirt strip in the middle of the orchard out there. But they fixed that up. You've made a lot of improvement. There's no place else to go. And there are more airplanes here than there ever were, because there's a whole lot more people. They're going to continue to be. You need to keep that in the picture. The rest works fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up. And while this gentleman's approaching, I'll call up Stephen Sokol, Aurora Solis, and Christian Olano.
Good evening. My name is David Gooden. I'm president of CAPSO. That's the Community and Airport Partnership for Safe Operations. I'm also president of a technology company in the Valley with facilities in San Jose and Nevada, and I use private aviation to facilitate travel back and forth between those and conduct business in the most efficient manner possible. Mr. Freitas, thank you very much for your work and your staff's work on this plan. I've seen the changes that have happened over time, and I like option one, accepting of FAA grants. Reed Hillview is an important part of the national transportation infrastructure, and it's the 5th busiest airport in California and the FAA designated reliever airport for San Jose International. This, of course, keeps the little airplanes and the big airplanes separated from each other, which enhances safety for everyone in the sky and on the ground. So as for the county leadership, I can only imagine the pressures that you are under for people who want to close the airport, and also we've heard from people who want a quick fix for the housing woes of the Valley. But Reed Hillview is an irreplaceable asset to the community. It inspires young people with Young Eagles flights we do out of there. Airport Day last year, Mr. Cortese, you were there. You saw the enthusiasm of the crowds. And San Jose State University Aviation Program, one of a kind in the state, irreplaceable. So while you consider the future of Reed Hillview, please keep in mind the big picture and the adverse effect that an unworkable business plan may have on our diverse community. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mastrocola.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm Bill Mastrocola, co-founder of the Winter Faith Collaborative. Thank you, supervisors and Director Freitas, for this opportunity to speak on this. As you may or may not know, I represent a network of churches, over 35 churches, that nearly 3 years ago took up the challenge from the city of San Jose for the opportunity to help in emergency basis for in the winter of 2015 and 16, and we have done that for 3 years, and served over 1,000 people on emergency and transitional basis. We have seen the numbers go up, not down. We have seen a definite shortage in not only emergency, transitional, but long-term housing. So we believe there's a restriction that we have, just a natural restriction of housing and development that we need to change. And we think that this project this land could be used for that. Specifically, what we would like to help with is to help figure out what we can do from the community side to help, as we have before, and also to determine from staff or from the county executive what would be the process that you would use to take this forward, this alternative, which we support, the alternative, staff alternative to going forward with FAA. What does the process look at? Well, how long is it going to take, and what can we do to support that effort? Because we're fully in support of whatever makes sense, and in our minds, what makes sense is to use this underutilized land for development, community use, and housing, which I think we all know is critical and crucial right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Sokol, and I am a transplant to the area, only arriving just a few months ago. I am the founder of a startup in the aviation space, and I've got to tell you that aviation is something we really need to take a closer look at. There's a revolution that's quietly taking place. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's taking place here in the Valley. Companies like Opener and Joby that are creating what's really going to be the next generation of general aviation systems. I'm such a believer in this that as of today, I'm in the process of leasing the last remaining commercial space at Reed Hillview, so the place will now be fully occupied, at least until 2021. And it's just important to keep in mind that this is Silicon Valley. It's the place where the future actually happens. And one of the things that's going to be an important part of the future is a new variety of aviation. And if we get rid of the opportunity to participate in that, it will go someplace else. It will not be, in the best interest of this area. And so I think in that vein, we need to invest in keeping our airport, keeping it up to date, keeping it operating and healthy and available for the future, because this is where the future happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting the community to be open and express our feelings in favor of closing the Reed Hillview Airport in this case. And I thank each one of you for your attention and our concern.
Excuse me 1 minute. Are you Aurora?
My name is Aurora. I'm a member
Can you
of
start the
PACT.
clock? Thank you.
I'm a leader of PACT, People Acting in Community Together, longtime member of PACT. I've lived in the area since 1968 in the 95122 zip code. And I would like for you to each take into consideration that we have a housing crisis here in San Jose. We talk about it on the news every single day. The land could be used to provide more dense, much-needed affordable housing, especially with the light rail extension to East Reach. Your attention in this matter will be greatly appreciated, and please listen to our community's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christian, before you start speaking, come on forward if you would. I've got a card from Frank. I don't have a last name, but if you're Frank, please come on forward and you can speak. I have Awad. Please come up next, followed by Michael Brogley. Go right ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Christian Alano. I am an organizer with PACT, People Acting in Community Together. I do a lot of work at Most Holy Trinity Church, which is just a couple blocks away from the airport. I come to you today because there is a lot of people out there in the community that have been concerned with the airport for quite some time. I'll be first off to say that we are not in the business, nor do we want to displace people's dreams or destroy dreams of being a pilot or going to the aviation field, we recognize that it's really important for our community and our future. Having said that, there are some things that we would love people who are pilots out there to consider. Consider the impacts of what's happening to the community that has been there and the increasing impacts of what's happening today with the takeoffs and whatnot. There are a billion reasons I feel like we should close this airport, but to consider, one, for you to consider to stop accepting the Reed Hillview grants, the grants. One, there's the noise pollution. Two, there is at least the risk, right? I know there's minimized lead contained in the jet fuel, but I think that's something to consider. Is this an environmental justice problem, an issue that needs to be assessed? How many schools are within the, a half-mile radius of the airport? What, like 20 to 40, right? So we need to assess what that impact is on the kids, because even if there's a little bit of a risk from that lead, isn't that worth investigating and looking into, especially with the high number of children that live in the area? Two, we have to understand that this is a community that is rich in culture, that has been there, that has helped that community grow. This is no longer an orchard area, but we need to see and assess that land for where it is today. I have over 300 letters from the community that we've collected in support of closing it, and we look forward to hearing what decision is made for going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Frank Verowend. Mr. Chair and members, thank you for listening to us. Mr. Freitas, you have a very nice verbal and slide presentation, and they're more reasonable than the actual written business plan, so a little bit deceiving. But thank you for the improvements to the plan as the plan has evolved over the last year. It's definitely gotten much better. I'm going to be brief. There's no way that I can spend enough time to be detailed and actually address the real issues. I can only be at the high levels. Basically, the plan is a farce and it's unrealistic. It is not a credible attempt to ensure a thriving facility, which is what a business plan should be, a facility that contributes to the community. It is instead a plan to slowly destroy an important transportation hub in a region where transportation issues are one of the most critical problems we face. We've heard housing is definitely an issue. Transportation is another major issue, and it has been for the decades that I've lived in this area. I'm sorry, I'm kind of a newcomer. I've only been here for a few decades now. I recommend rejecting the plan unless the grants are accepted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ihab Awad. I'm a resident of San Jose, and I'm also the founder of Airball.aero, which is a collection of Silicon Valley engineers who are building innovative aviation safety systems, and we do a large amount of our flight testing using airplanes from Reed Hillview Airport. So I'd like to, first of all, speak from personal experience. I rent airplanes from Aerodynamic Aviation, which is an FBO there, and I'm good friends with the CEO and chief pilot and also with one of their instructors. And I do know that they are now swamped with students. They cannot hire instructors fast enough, and they're actually at capacity. It is impossible to schedule an instructor with them. So I believe that Reed Hillview Airport, or at least those businesses there that are doing well, are thriving, and the demand is massive. There's a lot of people who want to learn to fly. And so I ask for the county to keep that in mind, just make sure that this is really a commercially viable thing. Now, as to my friend who talked about the lead and the noise, I'd just like to add two things. First of all, I would recommend that the county think about bringing in lead-free auto gas that is also free from alcohol, because a large number of the training aircraft in this airport can actually use that fuel. And that allows us to have very much less of a lead impact. So alcohol-free MoGas, if you can get that in there, I think that'll eliminate a huge amount of lead. Also, as far as the noise is concerned, Europeans have had a lot of success with adding mufflers to aircraft. The aircraft owners complain because it saps their power, but that doesn't matter. We can actually get serious about noise, and we can get supplemental type certificates from the FAA and use technology to improve some of these problems. So I would encourage forward-looking solutions that use technology to improve rather than try to push against our airport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Michael, as you approach, please, I'd ask John English and John McGowan and Tyler Hernandez to come forward.
Hi, I'm Mike Brogley. I'm the president of SCAPA, which is the pilots organization for San Martin Airport. I'm also a San Jose resident. This summer has seen wildfires burning all across California with lots and lots of serious damage, including burning lots of homes. In the fall of 2016, the Loma Fire was burning right here in Santa Clara County. To fight that wildfire, CAL FIRE based more than a dozen firefighting helicopters at the San Martin Airport, taking advantage of the aviation infrastructure to efficiently get air attack resources right to the fire line. That's not something that can happen if the aerial firefighting base has to be set up on a golf course or an open field somewhere. The airport infrastructure made it possible for CAL FIRE to roll up in their temporary control tower and start operations right away. That's just one example of how county airports are critical resources to the community. If, God forbid, a wildfire were to break out in the Diablo Range and threaten the homes in San Jose, Reed Hillview would be the frontline base that CAL FIRE would pick to fight that fire. Santa Clara County has two valuable community resources in Reed Hillview and San Martin airports, and I'm urging this committee to support the recommendation of county staff, recommendation 1, that the county resume accepting federal airport improvement fund grants to maintain and improve both airports and grow these community resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. English.
Thank you. I'm John English, and I come from San Martin. I haven't heard anything much about San Martin yet. I lived there for 35 years, and we exist pretty well with the airport as it is, except for the jets when they take off over the countryside. I am disappointed the business plan says nothing about the effect outside the airports. The point I've made, I think it's deficient not to consider possible effects on surrounding areas. But San Martin is a rural environment. Without urban services, is under great pressure from developments. One of those developments is any additional work at the airport. RV parks are in the offing, religious institutions, porta potty distributions, boarding school, and rapidly increasing traffic. Now, that may not seem relevant to this plan, but this is the county we're dealing with here, and you should be considering all aspects of this plan and any effect it has anywhere else. The increase in airport traffic will certainly encourage additional development in and around San Martin, contributing to the destruction of the environment which was promised to the residents in the general plan previously approved by the supervisors here. Thank you.
My name is John McGowan. I'm a tenant out at the airport. I'd like to speak also in support of the staff recommendation for Mr. Freitas. Thank you for your patience in listening to all this input tonight. Some of us have been really curious. The process is open as it's supposed to have been, has had some strange twists and turns. We wondered sort of who was pulling some of the strings. But I'd like to speak to one very specific piece of this business plan, and that is there is a $25,000 top secret legal memo that seems to be the underpinning foundation for the alternative revenue sources and the property releases that are embedded in the report. So we haven't been able to see that. The council has thrown the attorney-client privilege blanket over the legal memo from Kaplan Kirsch. But based on the recommendations to obtain development releases and to break the grant assurance, the one that Mr. Freitas didn't mention was that using federal grant money to buy the airport land creates a perpetual obligation, not just a 20-year grant assurance. And that was acknowledged by Ms. Ravel, the county council, in her 2008 memo, which said that was not going to be a grant assurance that was easily busted. So based on the plan that says we can get releases and we can develop aviation land for non-aviation uses, we have to assume that the memo we can't see says that Kaplan Kirsch can easily litigate their way through these two obstacles. As a retired attorney, my advice is to be really skeptical when a $25,000 legal memo, opinion memo, coming from a firm that's hoping to earn millions of dollars in litigation, that's not one to be trusted. So,
Thank you very much. And are you Tyler?
Yes, sir.
Tyler, before you start speaking, Mr. Hernandez, before you start speaking, I'd like to ask Angelica Flores to come forward, and Tina for Spanish translation. Thank you very much. If you'll accompany her up there, that'd be great. Followed by Anissa Moeller, and then Mitch Mankin. Mr. Hernandez, you're on.
Good evening, board members. My name is Tyler Hernandez. I'm a senior at San Jose State University. I'm also the former captain of our precision flying team there at San Jose
Go
State.
Spartans.
Go Spartans. First, I'd like to commend the airport staff for taking into our input and recommending that we accept grant money in Plan 1. That's what I support. I'm very happy with that aspect. I am concerned, however, about the FBO restructuring. SJSU Aviation is getting more and more students like myself who want to be professional pilots. That's our goal in life. And we come to SJSU because we can only afford to go to an in-state public university. San Jose State University is the only one in California that can do that for us. The reason why I bring up the FBO restructuring is I believe it will hurt our major and potentially even kill it due to lack of available flight training. Like the other gentleman mentioned, there are a lot of students flying right now, and it's pretty hard to find an instructor. Reconsolidating stuff might not be the best for us. With that, I ask going forward you guys reconsider the part about the FBO restructuring, but I do support taking grant money and keeping our airport open. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. And we're going to put the timer on 4 minutes here so that we have the Spanish and then the English translation opportunity. Welcome.
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Angélica Flores.
Good evening, my name is Angelica Flores.
Soy mamá de 3 niños y he vivido en el ISAE de San José por aproximadamente 15 años.
I'm a mother of 3 children and I've lived in East San Jose for approximately 15 years.
Soy parte de un grupo de personas en mi comunidad que estamos reuniendo para buscar lugares donde se podrían construir viviendas asequibles.
I'm part of a group that's advocating for fair and affordable housing construction for people in need.
Hemos mirado varios lugares, pero alguno de ellos ha sido el aeropuerto. Consideramos que el aeropuerto podría ser usado de una manera más productiva.
There's many places that we have considered, and one of the main considerations is the airport and how it can be better utilized for housing.
Muchas cosas que salen en esas conversaciones que tenemos es el miedo que tenemos de ser desalojados y desplazados. Y pues con todo esto que está pasando en San José, que ya sabemos la industria y todo, creemos que tenemos que prevenir a muchas personas que estamos en riesgo. Y por eso creemos que debe de ser cerrado y usado de una manera más que ayude a la comunidad.
And we understand that housing is a big concern here in Silicon Valley, and we should be at the forefront of assisting those people with doing everything that we can.
Gracias.
De nada. Thank you. You, Mr. Mankin?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Chairperson Cortese and Vice Chairperson Wasserman. My name is Mitch Mankin, and I'm here on behalf of Silicon Valley at Home, the voice for affordable housing in Silicon Valley. And on behalf of our members, I'm here today to address the Reed Hillview site. So taking staff analysis and community engagement into account, we'd like to make the following recommendations. First, please support staff's second set of recommendations, which will allow the county to explore a non-aviation use for Reed Hillview after 2031. And secondly, please continue to pursue opportunities to include affordable housing in the future on the Reed Hillview site. We're in a deep housing crisis, with many families struggling, many people in the street, and new opportunities for affordable housing are desperately needed. We understand this is a long process and that nothing can change until after 2031, but we urge the county to stay the course so that these two opportunities could come into fruition. Focusing on alternative uses will open up possibilities for increased revenue for the county, as well as offering the opportunity to respond to the many needs that do exist, such as the necessity for recreational space and for affordable housing. We urge this body to stay the course towards making sound land use decisions that are consistent with our future needs. We'd also like to thank staff for their robust outreach and engagement with the surrounding community, as well as the individuals that do utilize the airport for the current intended use. Dialogue created in these meetings is very necessary for understanding the dynamics of the Reed Hillview site and how that site can potentially become both a higher yielding source of revenue and also provide much more to the residents of the east side and throughout the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. Mulder, before you begin, I'd ask Serena Alvarez, Kathy Mattingly, Chris Bennett, and Susan Price to come forward. Thank you.
All right, my name is Anissa Moeller. I'm a flight instructor and pilot at Reed Hillview. I also live in downtown San Jose. And like most people here, I worry about my rising rent, and I see the homeless struggling on the streets and sleeping in the shadows in downtown. I know this housing crisis is real. However, in spite of what some people want us to believe, repurposing or closing Reed Hillview is not the answer. What's missing from the supplemental report and all reports is the fact that in the early 2000s, this county committed to the FAA to operate Reed Hillview's property as an airport forever. Any attempt to go back on that commitment will take decades of legal battles and cost hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars, and unfortunately, the most likely result is failure. It's time to stop investing taxpayers' money in hopes on a failing strategy to meet a very worthy goal. The county has other less encumbered properties that can be repurposed for housing much more quickly at much lower cost. I urge this committee to move forward with making these airports into the strategic assets they can be. Please take action as recommended by your appointed Airports Commission in their letter dated September 12, 2018. This is on pages 152 and 153 of the agenda packet. Their recommendations can make the airport self-sufficient and benefit the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm Kathy Mattingly. I represent one of the churches of the Diocese of San Jose and probably the diocese itself in saying that 3 years ago we've recognized a housing crisis, a shelter crisis, and we continue to urge everyone to step up and look at everything that we can do to help. But what we often find is that whatever is proposed, oh, well, no, there's another place over there. That one would be better. Well, no, you don't want this thing spread out. You want them built up. Oh, no, if you built them up high, oh, my gosh. There's always something wrong or something better. People are dying on the street more every year. And this is not a crisis that's likely, unless our whole economy turns around, to go away. So we need to start planning now because it takes 10, 15, 20 years to get things in motion. So all I'm urging you to do is not to keep taking federal money that further incumbents. I'm sorry. I've gotten upset and I can't speak English. I don't speak Spanish very well either. So I want you to stop. Do not take more money to further tie up our hands so that rational planning can't take place. It's not necessarily true that housing for the very low income will be the best use, but if you keep tying it up without having first actually proven that continuing to build up this small airport is the best use, then you're just not looking ahead well. Please, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Chris Bennett. I was born and raised in this area, which unfortunately was a few years ago. I'm a pilot and keep an airplane at Reed Hillview. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the business plan, which I'm not going to try and address, but there are two things I wanted to talk about, which aren't necessarily directly in the business plan, but I think are relevant, are the contrast between the plan or the proposals, the various proposals to repurpose the land at Reed Hillview for housing, and the current plans that are underway, apparently, to repurpose the county fairgrounds lands for a curling rink and the MX facility, and I forget what the other one is, several other things. And it's just interesting to me, interesting I guess is an understatement, as a taxpayer in this area, that one is readily available for one set of uses and the other, and I wasn't aware, maybe there was a lot of discussion about using the county fairgrounds for housing rather than the airport facility. The second is if the county is not interested in pursuing actively supporting one of the busiest airports, small airports in the state of California, it rivals San Jose International in terms of its operation count, is opening the possibility of doing some kind of a working summer arrangement with the city of San Jose, who does operate San Jose Municipal, and possibly working out a deal to involve the abandoned golf course land that's nearby the water park nearby. It's a comparable piece of land that would also be potentially suitable for other uses as well. I'm pretty confident that the city of San Jose would not be interested in closing Reed Hillview and the pressure that that would put on San Jose International and the effect it would have on its growth plans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Price, and I'm here to say that the county's investment in light rail that is now coming to East Ridge, as well as the BART that is now coming into San Jose, means that the whole economic equation has changed, and that land where Reed Hillview now sits is far more valuable used for other purposes, such as housing, and especially if we could have low-income housing, but a variety of housing. All the things that are happening now at Reed Hillview could be put into San Martin where it belongs. We shouldn't have student pilots or experimental aircraft flying over densely populated areas as it is currently. Now, if we move all this stuff, if we take the assets from Reed Hillview and put them into San Martin, that will also help protect San Martin that remains to remain agricultural, because the county controls that land, and I don't think it's going to make the same mistake twice that it made around Reed Hillview. Reed Hillview is outdated. It doesn't belong in a heavily populated area, and the economic benefit is diminishing as that land, because of the transportation building assets that now go to there, it's going to be much more valuable to the community at large and to business to have housing placed there. And so this is a greater economic benefit to a larger number of people by having the airport moved to San Martin. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Serena, before you start, I'd like to ask Ben Bierman, Victor Vasquez, and Karen Gillette to queue up, if you would, please.
Thank you, Supervisor. My name is Serena Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Salvador E. Alvarez Institute for Nonviolence. I'm here representing the Institute, which is a program out of the Friends of Human Relations, work with Ann McEntee. I represent Council 3090 of the League of United Latin American Citizens, founded by my father years ago. And I also want to represent my mom tonight, who was at the meeting that Director Freitas held at Reed Hillview in March, and she's president of Evergreen School District and needed at the district tonight. I want to thank Director Freitas for conducting a dignified and respectful process. We really appreciate that. The community has felt that you are respectful. That's very important. I want to thank the committee for offering this time. I have two questions, but I want to primarily express support for that the committee accept the staff alternative that does not call for further federal grants at Reed Hillview and that would promote consolidation of aviation services at San Martin. But two questions that are really important for the community, because Director Freitas was very clear during the process that the scope of the study was limited and that he was willing to hear the community out, and that was done, but that the scope was limited. And so what we would need to know now, and what I'm urging, is that we would need to explore and get information about the process of land conversion for Reed Hillview, because that was we kept abutting a limit. And so I would really request and urge the committee to have that explored. The process for conversion, we understand, would be lengthy. People here today supporting the alternative have already expressed that that's the time we've accepted that, but we need to know about the process. What does that time frame include? We also would need to know, as Director Freitas managed so well, the community having input in the process. So planning for land use involving the community is absolutely imperative, and we'd need to know what can the community do.
Thank you, Serena.
Hi, I'm Ben Bierman. I'm a pilot. Came to the Valley in '95. Been living in San Jose ever since, and using the great services that are at the Reed Hillview Airport. There are 9 great tenants that provide great service to pilots. You know, I came out here to work at high-tech companies like Applied Materials and Coherent. That's not where the job growth is happening now, and it's certainly not where it will be in a few years. It's companies like the startups that you heard from that are working on a revolution in transportation. So San Jose should be investing in being part of that. So I want to say I strongly support the airport plan that was put together and taking the FAA grants. However, the FBO restructuring, I think, is a mistake. The idea that we would kick out 9 business people from San Jose that have been running businesses on the airport that support the San Jose aviation program. I'm also a San Jose alumnus. Just seems crazy to me that we would be taking action to put 9 business people out of business and all of their employees. The new FBOs, if and when they ever came, would not replace these companies. I also want to say I live near Agnews, and so there's some great land there. There's the fairgrounds. This is a false dichotomy. We should not be putting at odds the people that want housing for the homeless and for low-income people and the people that want an airport as a resource for all the value that an airport brings. We're not against each other. Pilots want housing for poor people, and frankly, all of these poor people and people in these communities need jobs, and the airport can provide jobs and a pathway to jobs in the airlines. There's a huge demand right now. I think that probably covers the most important points.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Gillette, and I've spoken to you before, but now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I was a flight attendant in a previous life when I was young, and I have flown internationally into large airports, small airports, so you know, I have that background that I carry with me. I do know that because I attended some of the stakeholder meetings that were held about the Reed Hillview Airport, that the airport services at this very small airport, local airport, there are very few people, I think, that are served, even with the students, and I understand their perspective. But I'm also a member of the Winterfaith Collaborative, so I understand the problems and the issues with trying to solve our housing crisis. And I don't think there's anybody here in this room that would wonder if we do have a housing crisis or not. I think we'll agree with that we do. So I think that dealing with the present and helping as many people as we can and planning for the future to try to keep ahead of, or at least some kind of resolution to our housing crisis is important. I think that right now what I would ask is that you accept the alternative plan and that no more grants be accepted, and that we become more aware of what the process will be as we move into the future, and the process to continue to have community input into this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vasquez, before you begin, if I could please ask Robert Aguirre to come forward, Francesca Favreau, and Milt Krantz.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Victor Vasquez. Thank you again for having this community info in this meeting at this time so we can continue to provide community input. I work at Somos Mayfair, one of the program managers. I'm also an alumnus of San Jose State. One of the things that we do is we work with community in the east side to make sure that their needs are heard, and also that there's always community voice in the process. When our members heard about this, the possibility of Hillview and the potential alternative process that could happen or closing of it, and also the issue, a lot of our members felt concerned about the health implications, the need for housing, and they wanted to make sure that we were here to represent. So one of the problems that we saw was that, you know, the airport sits within a community of working class families, communities of color, there's parks, there's schools around there, and we know about the health concerns that could happen, that within 1 kilometer of having an airport that's pretty much using lead could cause. For us, was cognitive development that we found, the higher risk of HDHD. In our adult population, the decrease of dysfunction of cardiovascular and kidney use, we can go on and on, but we also found out that the Center of Disease Control, saw that Alum Rock and the east side have one of the highest levels of lead exposure in our counties, in the Bay Area. And so we're really concerned about that because it also exceeds the national average. We also heard some of our members speak about the need for housing. We have families and community members moving out, all residents who are also living in vehicles. And there's a need for us to really think about alternative ways that we can use this space. So I want to recommend also with the alternative plan that the staff put together to start declaring our intent of closing the space down, but most importantly for us to bring community together and think about a visioning process for this space. I recommend that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Aguirre. Thank you all for allowing me to speak. And I want to thank Peggy Doyle over there for all the hard work she's doing. She doesn't get much recognition. I'd like to address the situation of the Reed Hillview Airport, is why we're here. We do have a need for housing. Just today, Supervisor Cortese, you were at the Hope Village, and you saw how people are working to try to solve this problem on a temporary basis. And we do have a massive housing crisis, and all land, it doesn't matter what land, is cheapest if you already own it. You can't buy land. If you already own land and you sell that land and try to buy that land back again, it's going to cost you more money. So the fact is that we already own this land, and you can leverage that property. If you decide you want to lease that property out for building supportive housing, permanent supportive housing, you can always use that to leverage to get more money from somewhere else. I know that the FAA has a 50% interest in the equity, and there's a possibility that they could be bought out. There's a possibility they may become partners with us. There's also a possibility that President Trump may decide to pull FAA funds from everybody. I mean, some of the stuff that he's doing, we have no idea what's going to happen. And as far as future investors that are coming in that want to have different products and such, we can all recall from 2008 when the dot-com crisis came tumbling down, and there's no promise that there's going to be any success in the future from such investments. And no one has ever been hurt by a curling team hurling their curling irons or whatever they call those things. And so an airport becomes much more dangerous, and we want to make sure that people are safe and have a good place to live, and that we can solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Francesca Favaro. I'm one of the leading faculty members at San Jose State Aviation Program. What I would like to provide tonight is a word of caution on your recommendation for the new FBO structure in how it will affect the aviation program at San Jose State, and also provide input against the alternative option and in favor of taking FAA grants. In particular, I failed to see how the business plan currently provides a sound justification for the new structure of the FBOs and how that will be better than the current situation. Also, there are uncertainties and missing information that prevent us from really understanding the impact and implications of the new FBO model on the training that San Jose State students actually undergo. Currently, 80% of our 263 students enroll in San Jose State University to pursue a career as professional pilots. We are affiliated with 2 flight schools at Reed Hillview as our students commute back and forth from main campus in downtown San Jose. So San Martin is definitely not an option to move our program to. Not many people know that we are the only public institution in entire California to offer a 4-year Bachelor of Science in Aviation, that we serve minorities and first-generation college students also. 76% of our students come from the local Bay Area, and we currently lease the Swift Avenue building and are a major source of revenue for the airport leases. Not addressing how the new proposed FBO structure will impact us, it's actually a flaw in the business plan. The aviation program sure hopes that you will take into account the impact that your recommendations will have on our educational institution, which would likely close should Reed Hillview Airport or the associated businesses and FBO be put in a condition that prevents them from thriving. And this is why San Jose State is against your alternative option, and thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. And Mr. Krantz, as you approach, I'll ask Supervisor Blanca Alvarado to come forward and Jaime Alvarado, and I'll ask anybody else that wishes to speak on this item this evening to fill out a speaker card. This is last call. Welcome.
Welcome, and good evening. My name is Milt Krantz. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Network and Silicon Valley Renters' Rights Coalition. And I'm here tonight to speak about the Hillview Reed Airport and what's going to happen to it. There's good reasons for keeping this open, keeping the services here, but we think there's better reasons for closing it and moving its great services somewhere else. Why? Because of the housing crisis, which overwhelms just about everything else in this valley. We have such a tremendous need, especially for affordable housing. So this land, if it eventually was dispersed and it was used for affordable housing, that's a great footprint. That's a wonderful way, a great step in helping to alleviate this overwhelming problem. And that's what we, of course, hope will happen at the end of this process. And that's what we're advocating. Myself, the groups I'm in, and the thousands of people in this valley who are desperately looking for some place to live that's affordable. And one thing I'd like you to remember, in helping to choose that option, that land is in an airport. It is rather isolated from neighborhoods and would probably not have the tremendous complaints that we hear from other land that wants to be used for that purpose, or we would like it to be, about, oh, not in my neighborhood. This land is not really in anybody's neighborhood as far as the residential people go, and the complaints might be a lot smaller. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Jaime and Blanca, come on forward. We've got Ruth Saldivar and then John McCrate, and those are the last two cards I have. Again, anybody else wishing to speak on this item, we need you to submit your cards now, or we'll be closing the public hearing portion. Welcome.
Thank you. I want to first state very clearly that I support the alternative plan to begin the process of closing Reed Hillview Airport and expanding the capacity of Morgan Hill Airport. Kristen earlier mentioned the phrase environmental justice. What's going on in Reed Hillview Airport is clearly an environmental justice issue. We have low-income, primarily people of color communities that live around the airport and are affected on a daily basis by that airport. Mr. Freitas did a good job. But I do want to make sure I point out that, in fact, during the planning process, there was a tremendous amount of community input, and you probably have the details on that, but I want to make sure that you understand. In fact, there was a lot of people there who were there as they've been there for decades to make the case for closure of Reed Hillview Airport. And I'm not sure, the two of you gentlemen weren't here at that time in the last round of community debate about Reed Hillview Airport, but you're in this position now. And there's a long history that goes back many decades of community people actually fighting against the airport. And one of the reasons is that if you look at the aerial maps, it's clear that all the other regional airports are surrounded by or adjacent to bodies of water or agricultural land or Highway 101. Reed Hillview is the one that's surrounded by neighborhoods. And just take a look at the pictures that we saw in the planning process, and it makes that point very clear. I also wanted, the county's never made the case to the local community why this airport is important, needs to be there, surrounded by our community. And I think that is a failure of the county over decades, have been able to do that. The other thing about the plan, some of the revenue projections are speculative. I think if you really develop...
Finish that sentence.
If you really develop a community supported master plan for that land at Reed Hillview Airport, you could really generate the benefits, the economic returns for the county, benefit to the community.
Thank you very much.
And expand the capacity at Morgan Hill. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ruth Saldivar, and I am a member of the PACT organization. I wanted to just say that I listened to this presentation and I heard that it's an inefficient layout that was created 50 years ago when San Jose was an incredibly different kind of city, not the 10th largest city in the United States with a population of over 1 million people. I've heard that it's underutilized and the revenue is insufficient. I also heard that they are looking for reimbursement for two small paltry community benefits. One, a small Little League organization, and the second, a fraternal organization that provides community services. The land can provide better economic benefit for our community if we had alternative uses for it that are not using county funding. It is valuable land that can be used for our housing crisis, and it cannot, having an airport there, hold San Jose hostage to future development. We are not a small town any longer. We don't really need a regional airport inside the city of San Jose. I am not advocating closing all airports in the county, but moving it to San Martin and building a larger regional airport out there where there's already open land and that you can now keep that land open so the housing is not compromised, but you have allowed the land to be there. People have been there for 40, 50 years as well. We have built more and more land, housing, and we continue to need housing in our city.
Thank you. Welcome, Supervisor.
Hi, good evening, supervisors. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mike, for having this meeting at night. It's really important. And my thanks to staff. We met in March, and we've been watching and observing and following your procedure very, very carefully, and are really, really excited about the possibilities that exist for the future of Reed Hillview. Let me just respond to two things that the staff reported. That they want to have some coherent land use possibilities at Reed Hillview in the future. Well, I can assure you that the airport for 40 years has been an incoherent land use as it surrounds neighborhoods and schools and churches. I know, as someone who has lived in East San Jose for 70 years, that it is literally impossible to enjoy a summer morning in one's backyard because of the noise. It is literally impossible to sleep at night when there is no curfew. So the incoherent land uses that have existed around us as a result of Reed Hillview really need to be changed. Two other issues that were brought by other speakers about the noise and about the leaded gas. You know, we had been promised for years that the noise would be mitigated, and yet tonight somebody suggested mufflers. We've talked about noise, we've talked about leaded gas for a long, long time, and nothing has changed. I do not believe, however, that this is a time for us to be us versus them. I think we as a county really have reached the point of no return. It is really, really time, if you are going to look forward to developing a business plan, staff and supervisors. It is best said that the best way to predict the future is to invent it. We can invent the future for Reed Hillview by considering multiple uses that will benefit larger segments of the community and will make San Jose proud. The Reed Hillview Airport is outdated, it is passé, it does not belong where it's at, and we urge you to seriously consider all of the multiple uses that could take place there. It will take time, but it can be done. Si se puede. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Fisher, before you begin, you're Mr. Fisher, correct?
I'm John McCrane.
John McCrane, yes, thank you. After you, please, I'll call up Mr. Fisher, Diego Mora, Peyton, and Peyton Ineguez? Was that close? I can't recognize that first letter. All right, and Stephen McHenry. Thank you, Mr. McCrane. Go ahead.
Thank you for your time, and thank you again for improving the plan over time. I was also part of the earlier meetings for airport use. I would echo the concerns of the San Jose State folks, and that the 2 leaseholds may not be enough. I would like to see a plan with additional leaseholds available for small startups that are entering the aerospace technology area. It doesn't necessarily have to be all about providing services directly to the pilots, but there are some businesses that benefit directly from being airport adjacent or having access to the airfield as well. So there's just a small consideration there. I'm highly in favor of accepting the grants from the FAA, and I would like to express a concern with transportation infrastructure that these are things that you don't really ever get to take back once they're gone. Much like a railway, right-of-way, or roadways, any transportation infrastructure, it exists there to support the communities around it. This airport, I believe, supports the communities around it, especially San Jose International, for which it is officially a reliever airport and supports pulling some traffic away from there, which increases safety by ensuring that we're not overstuffing the airports that do exist on the waterfronts, that exist elsewhere in the area. There needs to be enough airport infrastructure to support all the users in the area, and simply moving the air traffic around is not a safe plan. It's not a good plan. And I'd like to see more housing, but I just don't think we should be ripping up transit infrastructure today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen McHenry, longtime San Martin resident for over 20 years, and also a pilot and flight instructor. I think it's important to realize that the Reed-Hillview Airport provides a very important function to the community, not only for the flight training, as we've said, but there are also businesses there that derive their livelihood from it. I do have some concerns on the two FBO option that many people have expressed before, but I recognize that the revenue aspects of the airport do need to increase. I think it would be an absolute mistake to close the airport and try to move all that traffic to San Martin. San Martin is a rural airport. It functions very well in its capacity, but even the expansion that has been proposed and mentioned in the current business plan, I believe is a mistake. It would decimate a rural community with jet noise, which there are 1 or 2 jets that land there now. They're not that obnoxious, but to expand the runway clearly would invite that kind of traffic on a much larger scale. So I would definitely, and by the way, I want to say compliments on the business plan. I thought it was very well done. And I definitely want to express my support in favor of option 1, accepting the grants and continuing to move forward with both airports. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
Hello, my name's Daryl Fisher. I am a pilot. I fly out of Columbia Airport. I live in Tuolumne County, but I'm here to let you guys know that flying is very important. I was actually one of those minorities that didn't have a place to live as a child, but aviation has changed my life, and the Bay Area doesn't have enough small airports around. I think this is really important to keep it here. So I come here a lot, and I also use San Martin to come. I have friends all around here, and I do spend my money here and help the community myself, I think. So definitely, I believe it's a good idea to keep it here.
Thank you. So Peyton, what's the first letter of your last name?
Y.
It is a Y, okay. Got it, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm Peyton Iniguez, and first I want to thank you for allowing me to speak and taking the time to hear what we all have to say on this issue. I myself am a first-generation American, first-generation college student. I'm the youngest of 4 daughters, and if it weren't for San Jose State in the program, I probably wouldn't have even finished high school. So this was my opportunity to see my future and have a higher education. So I just wanted to be something that is thought very hard on, because I know that I'm not the only one in my program who relies wholly on this program in order to improve my future and have a better life for myself and, hopefully my kids when I have them one day. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're Mr. Mora? Yes. You are. And is Marcy Gersten? Marcy, come on in line. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Mora.
Yes, San Jose resident, born and raised. I just want to express my concerns about the whole record of what's being proposed here today. I don't think there's enough train of thought of what would happen depending on this piece of land, for example. Comments were made about San Martin, but then again, what are the environmental impacts if we build out or we encouraging sprawl? Another implication that I want to just clarify is that there are a lot of students out here that are telling you what they want. Students are telling you what they see the future of San Jose. And time again, I come to these hearings, not just for the county, just generally speaking, and it seems that they get avoided, and let alone we're stripping an opportunity of learning, something that only some of us fantasize. I know driving down Capitol, I've thought about that airspace. It really is a landmark, not just for the city, but for the county. And I understand the health concerns, the housing concerns, and I'm not saying that's not important, but I really do think there should be a holistic and neutral perspective of what will happen if we go one way or the other, and what the FBO means for the funding for the student programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marcy Gersten, and I'm a resident in North County. But I'm sorry that I got here late. I really appreciate your adding me to the list, because it was really important for me to come and support the closure and the business plan to close Reed Hillview, because as you've heard today, nobody needs to tell you we have a housing crisis. There are 7,300 homeless folks in the county. And as I understand it from the plan, the county owns the land around San Martin and could develop that in a smarter way than, as we've seen what's happened with Reed Hillview. And I believe it can be done in a way that makes sense, that could retain flight training for the students at San Jose State. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's an opportunity for the county to be innovative, which is what we're really good at, and to work with potentially the city of San Jose, to work with San Jose State, for instance, to create possibly not only talk to them about how to transport the students to San Martin as opposed to Reed Hillview, but to create an education center to work and develop something that will help the residents that are around Reed Hillview right now. There are so many other innovative ways that it could be worked out. You have the opportunity now. You could serve many more county residents by closing Reed Hillview than keeping it open. And I know people who are private pilots and people who use that airport, and it's your job to benefit as many county residents as possible. And I think you have that opportunity right now, not only with the housing crisis, but education-wise and just being future thinking and forward thinking. And I really appreciate the business plan that you've put forward. And I think you should consider closing the airport and helping the residents of the county. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last card I have is from Miguel Alarcon. Come on forward. This is our final speaker for the evening.
I need translation.
Yes, translation coming on her way. Whoops, translator just went out the door. Francisco? You? Can he interpret for you? Yes, thank you. Please go ahead.
Mi nombre es Miguel, soy miembro de PAC y Somos Mayfair.
My name is Miguel. I'm a member of PAC and Somos Mayfair.
Soy líder. Yo viví en el área del aeropuerto.
I lived in the area around the airport.
Por alrededor de 2 años. Y mi experiencia al vivir allí, yo no lo vi tan ocupado como para que esté un aeropuerto allí antes de estar aquí. No lo veo necesario.
So my experience has been that I don't see that airport as occupied as a community resident.
Ahorita lo triste es ver las familias que están desalojándose de San José por la renta cara.
So what's really sad is to also see the impact of families leaving because of the high rent.
Mi hermana se acaba de mover, tiene 15 días en los baños, yendo y viniendo a las 4 de la mañana, se van a las 9 de la noche, y mi hermana está enferma y a 2 semanas, y ahorita hoy la vi y me puse triste porque es difícil ver 30 años viviendo ahí con sus 6 hijos, moverse todos hasta allá.
So my sister moved from here to Las Bañas. She's been commuting at 4 in the morning. It's really sad to see that people leave our community after living here for over 30 years.
La comunidad donde se movió ella en la ciudad de Los Baños, todos son del área de la bahía.
So all the people that have moved over there, Los Baños, they're people from this area, from the Bay Area.
Y para mí sería muy importante que se cerraría ese aeropuerto para que la gente tenga derecho a regresar, que ha vivido por 15, 20 años aquí, que no le esté batallando.
So for me, the right thing to do is for us to think about closing this down so the people that have lived here for 15, 20 years could have the right to come back and not be struggling.
Y que muevan el aeropuerto en San Martín. San Martín, tengo muchos amigos, es una comunidad donde tiene todavía mucho espacio, donde sería muy buena idea cambiarlo para allá. Gracias.
So it'd be a good idea to move the airport back to San Martin. There's a space. The space allows it. There's a lot of empty space that would. Thank you.
Thank you. And is that enough time? You have 2 more minutes if you wish. If there's anything else you wanted to say. That's good. Thank you. All right, that concludes the public speaking portion of our item regarding item number 3. Supervisor Cortese, on our agenda is to receive the report from Roads and Airports, but I'm thinking they also are looking for some direction.
Thank you, Supervisor Wassman. And first time I'm speaking up here. First of all, let me apologize for coming in a few minutes late. For those that may be wondering, I do take this issue very seriously. I had to deal with a family situation all the way in Palo Alto, come back to the east side, and then come back here. And it was a wonderful experience in commute traffic on trying to do that. So that's my excuse. But I am also grateful for Supervisor Wassman to get the meeting started on time and all of you to get things rolling, especially since I'm very familiar with the report. As far as a little bit of direction moving forward, listening to all the testimony, I guess the only thing I'm grateful for is the even-tempered nature of the testimony. This has been, in the past, certainly an emotionally charged issue at times, and for good reason. There's a lot of attachment to investment in the airport, and there's a lot of attachment to quality of life around the airport, and these issues at one level or another have been debated for decades, just as one of the speakers reminded us. So I thought the even-tempered testimony today as to what people would like to see was good. It's a good sign for Santa Clara County when we can have dialogue like this in a boardroom. One of the things that I think is missing here, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not clear at this moment exactly whether I agree exactly with either of the 2 options that's before us. I do have some leaning toward option 2, but I think there's an option 3 here that people have been speaking about, pro and con, today or tonight, that really isn't laid out as an option, and that is, and again, I want to further preface that by saying I've heard people say, investment, any kind of extensive investment in San Martin would be a mistake or just be kind of dismissive about it. I've heard people almost assume that would be the case, even though we really don't have a capital improvement project for San Martin in front of us or, any real serious analysis, nor and even though it is true, there are some legal opinions around that the board is privy to, and so we know some of the constraints and so forth. We haven't really ever woven the legal framework for what you would do if you were really trying to do someday a full consolidation to San Martin. We haven't really pieced that all together. And I would really like to see what that looks like. It doesn't mean I have a final predisposition toward doing that, but we are dealing with really, really important and valuable assets here, whatever we decide to do with them. And to have one option that is so obvious that people are coming up who are not necessarily even experts on one side or the other saying, why don't you do the option of consolidation and expansion in San Martin and really not have that literally before us, I think is telling. So I would like, as far as direction goes, to essentially do sort of a referral from the dais, Supervisor Wasserman, and ask that additional analysis be done and brought back to the board. So in effect, unless you have a fourth option you want to look at, which is fine with me, but at least before we gave final direction, we would have a chance to vet this notion that maybe someday after 2031, there's sort of a mega general aviation airport in San Martin that's been heavily invested in, and an asset in Reed Hillview that has evolved maybe even further than what option 2 lays out at this point. Why would I even go there? For those of you who talked about being around, I can't go back to 1948 because I wasn't born until 56, but I was born right down the street. And, 14 years old, I was put to work farming the 200 acres that is immediately east of the airport, which was an old dairy that was red oat hay. The airport was there. Eastridge was just becoming Eastridge. It was a golf course before that. There was a dairy across the street from that. There was one Safeway in a radius of about 6 miles. It was a different community. But the most important thing I want to emphasize is real estate was going for $4,500 an acre, $4,500 an acre at that time. I'm not talking about 56. I'm talking about the early 1970s when I was growing up in the area. And there are people here who remember that. So if you just do back of the envelope math, looking at property that would be valuable, just like the fairgrounds would be valuable for a relatively high density residential development. I want to acknowledge the speaker who said you have other assets out there that are worth a lot of money. You're talking about a piece of property in Reed Hillview that is approximately valued on the market today, if we put it on the market, at $500 million. And so I've had people come to me on the airport side, pilots who I've known for years, who I have a great relationship with, say, how could you turn down $1 million in federal grants? And my business mind says, how can you turn down $500 million of capital that we could go build you the finest airport in the western United States? So I'm trying to make a business decision on the numbers based on what's there. And I think that option 3 may help kind of flesh that out a little bit more, because maybe it's not a real option. Maybe it's so difficult to pull something like that off, as some people alluded to, that we can't do that anyway, and then you default back to option 1 or option 2. It's not all about money, but just to put a punctuation mark on my back of the envelope math, any of this urban real estate that we have now, particularly on the light rail corridor, is intended for urban village use or high density residential use if it is converted under the city's general plan. The corridor, the transportation corridor that Reed Hillview is on, the rest of it is general planned at 180 units to the acre now. That is at $500,000 a unit, and I would defy anyone to buy a residential unit for $500,000, but just to be conservative, at $500,000 a unit, 180 units to the acre, you're talking about $90 million an acre in total revenue times 180 acres. Look, I love my family cherry orchard, but when we were losing money every year on 50 acres of cherries, putting money into it, and trying to pick cherries to get money back out of it, and we were losing a couple $100,000 a year, somebody pointed out that the underlying real estate was so valuable that you could put it in the bank and go buy the cherries and still be money ahead on the open market. And it's that kind of analysis that I would just want to say to you, I'm brought up business-wise to look at assets in that way. That's how my mind operates. And I know, Supervisor Wassman, whether we eventually agree on option 1, option 2, or an option 3 or 4, that you and I have a tendency to be people who look at numbers as very important, that these valuations and numbers are very important. So thank you, those that are advocates for housing. Thank you, those that are advocates for general aviation. I have no interest whatsoever in displacing anybody. I was instrumental in bringing San Jose State over after they were evicted from San Jose International Airport as before your time students, but we had to find a home, and my office was instrumental in bringing you over to Reed Hillview. We don't want you displaced. We don't want pilots displaced from Santa Clara County. But if there's a way to replace assets and get everybody in a better situation, that's something that I'd like to look at. So that's it. I apologize for the lengthy comments, but is that referral fairly clear? Just the basic thing I'm asking for, Mr. Freitas, is a third option that shows us what a full-on consolidation would entail and to what degree there's obstacles to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And for clarity of the record, I won't be joining you on that referral as far as San Martin Airport goes. But Mr. Freitas, you know anybody can bring forth a referral to the board asking for another option. And I think Supervisor Cortese made that very clear. When I got here 7 years ago, the county budget was $5 billion. We had 14,000 employees. Then it was $5.5 billion, then $6 billion, then $6.5 billion, then $7 billion. We had 14,000 employees, and then 16,000, then 18,000, then 20,000. Now I hear we're headed towards 22,000. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't know that. My firm belief is that Reed Hillview plays a value as far as a reliever airport for San Jose Airport. I do not want to displace people either. I know that Santa Clara County, thanks to Measure A that 2/3 of you voted for 2 years ago, we have 750 right now $1 million in the bank waiting for opportunities to build affordable housing, low income, very low income, extremely low income housing. We just funded 10 projects in the last 90 days, 850 units being built. And we're looking for another 30 or 40 of those to do. There's opportunities around and there's dollars around. But I'm not, first of all, I'm convinced the airport, Reed Hillview, should stay. But secondly, bless you, secondly, even if the land became available, which the federal government owns, and even if 13 years from now we were engaged in some lawsuit with the FAA and we regained control of that, the county would then have to buy the 50% that the federal government owns at whatever the market price is. And when developments are built now, with few exceptions, it's 10-15% of a development that goes to affordable housing, or developmentally disabled housing, or extremely low-income housing, or very low-income housing. We have the money and the need now. Several of you spoke about a crisis now. I'm not looking what if 13 years from now we continue not taking federal funding from the government to improve our airports that everybody agrees are not, Director Freitas, you mentioned, they're not up to snuff, and we got to do something through the general fund or the federal government or something. But I'm not looking 13 years down the road as far as housing. I'm looking for now. We have the money now. We're looking for opportunities now. Tonight's discussion was about a business plan. Staff gave us on page 9 of 12 of the agenda. And Mr. Freitas, when you bring this back at some point, if you could have the different recommendations numbered differently. So you've got the first 5. Staff's recommendations are items 1 through 5, and then alternatively, there's 1 through 5. If you could just make those 6 through 10 for me next time, that would just be more helpful. But I'm in favor of your first 4 recommendations. I have a bit of concern about taking the freight-based operators down to 1 and looking at a couple others. Some points were made here about the businessmen that own those FBOs now and displacing. I'm not convinced yet that going from 6 FBOs to 1 FBO makes economic or significantly enough economic sense for the county to do that. But that's the small issue. I think for most of you what the issue is taking federal money now or not taking federal money now. If we take federal money now, then it comes with strings attached and we're further encumbered to operate an airport. I believe from the study that was done and the recommendation by staff, I believe we have the ability to take money from the federal government now to improve the condition of our airport, still repurpose some of the land around, as Harry and Eric, as you showed in your PowerPoint, repurpose some of the land around to bring in revenue to the airports and do that. We'd have a better conditioned airport. We'd have an additional revenue source. And again, for people advocating here tonight, and thank you for all you do for the homeless and the extremely low income and the very low income, we have the money to do it. We need to find the place to do it. And that's the next issue, and there's a lot of things being considered. But Supervisor, I respect and understand your option 3, and I think staff picked that up. Sylvia bringing back a referral as this goes forward. I think we both agree in that this issue moves forward to the board from here. It doesn't come back here. Or are you?
I'm fine with that, as so long as staff doesn't feel a necessity to vet the option 3 here before going to the board. I don't need that. I mean, we can go.
If you wish it to do, it's totally up to you.
Sylvia, any thoughts on that? When I say here, I mean in one of our regular Hewlett meetings.
It's at the board's discretion. It's difficult to say now whether it would be worthy of consideration here until we can assemble what we think is responsive to your request, because if we're not, obviously that would be very concerning, taking that straight to the board. So I think when Mr. Freitas and I have an opportunity to meet, we can put our minds together with respect to what we believe you are seeking from us. And if we think we're on target, then certainly we can go straight to the board. But I do worry that we may not be as responsive to what you've set forth.
Why don't we bring it back to Hewlett then, Sylvia? I think, yeah, I think I don't think there's going to be a big disalignment between us in terms of what I'm asking for, although that was sort of a long-winded set of comments. I apologize for that. But sure. But I also think maybe if it stops here, even for a cursory review, we'll know it's ready for the board, and we won't have the reverse problem of having the board kick it back. Be a lot less likely. Thank you.
I think that's it, unless you have anything else to add.
I do not. Thank yous again to everybody for participating tonight.
Absolutely. I too appreciate the whole tone in the room. Anything else from staff members? No? Eric, you've talked way too much. Anything else to say? No? All right. Thank you. Supervisor, you're the chair, but with your permission, we will adjourn this meeting to the September 20th meeting.
So adjourned.
Thank you.